I feel amazing to be here. Thank you for having me, Ange.
Yeah. Do you remember the first thing I said to you when I attacked you at the dinner line? And I say attacked because I aggressively walked up to you and you're like, oh my God.
You'd be surprised how many people attacked me at that first night dinner line. Remind me what you did.
I said, you had me at latchkey, kid.
Ah, yes, that was our commonality. That's right. In my intro talk, I talked about being a latchkey kid, and you
Yeah.
were too.
I was absolutely. And it's part of my intro and my story as well. I think it sets us apart where the rest of the world goes, oh, I get it. You raised yourself. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, and even though it's funny because it also suggests, I love how you just get right into it. You're my type of interviewer, Angie.
Yes.
So I think it also suggests that parents were around, like you weren't an orphan, you weren't homeless, but
Yes.
there was a certain lack of presence that might have given you a little more time to get in trouble or think about things or create things, whatever it might be. But yeah, it's not just, oh, I raised myself. It's like there were people there,
Yeah.
but yeah, you were kind of figuring it out yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and my mom was 19 when she had me. So she was working two jobs. So I was a latchkey kid because she was, trying to support the family. But I am so grateful for it because I look at like where I am today and, all the shit we had to figure out and we didn't have cell phones and you just became very flexible in like problem solving. Like you figured it out. You didn't just call somebody, how do I fix this? You didn't just like look it up on the internet. It was like you actually had to problem solve stuff to figure it out, trial and error. And I'm just super grateful for that upbringing myself.
I am too. And as you talk about it, and especially the absence of cell phones, which is foreign to so many people today. I think we were really the last generation to know life before and life after cell phones and computers and internet. And when I just had a flashback as you were speaking, and there's part of me that is envious of the nervous system that I had back then. The nervous
Mm.
system was just, for me, it was like,
Mm.
it wasn't as pinged as it is now. It wasn't as jacked as it is now, where
Yeah.
I have to like take really concerted efforts to put the phone away, to not be entangled in things that have nothing to do with me. Whereas back then, you just couldn't. You had TV, so that was your access to the outside world, but you actually couldn't be ensnared in things that had nothing to do with you because we didn't have the cell phones or the technology. It was a really beautiful time. It's funny reflecting back on our time as
Yeah.
kids when it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it was cool too because it's like, when's dinner? I don't know. Is the sun going down? Yep. Must be dinner time. We didn't have watches. We didn't have pagers. It was just like, we just watched the sun. And it was like, oh, yeah, I guess I am getting kind of hungry. The sun's going down. Time to go home. Okay. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of I met you and know you from your beautiful Imiloa retreat where I was there with Jamie Myers and Shine Retreat. And it was so cool because the first couple of days we got there, you guys had just had the most amazing storm. Which I didn't believe any of you. You're like, oh my God, it never happens. I'm like, yeah, you guys probably say that all the time. But you had the most amazing storm that knocked out the power. So for the first 2 days we were there was no power, which meant there was no cell reception, which meant there was no texting. And it was so awesome. Like I loved it. It was so fun to explore your property. And then I was there with my daughter and everybody, and we were all just fully present because there was no reason to not be. And then the second the power came on and everybody was able to now check their phones, check their texts, check everything, it totally changed the dynamic. People would show up things, or they would show up late, or they just wouldn't show up because they were going to go work. And, this is not faulting anybody, but it just instantly changed everything the second we had the attachment to that.
It was remarkable. It was a remarkable chapter. I will tell you, we have not lost power since, and we now have a generator that can sustain the whole campus after that experience.
Oh,
That was probably yeah, that was probably one of the most interesting few days in the last 5 years of my doing Imiloa and my involvement with Imiloa. Your planes, because we fly in the guests, as you know, in planes, in their own planes. And so your planes were landing as 25 trees toppled over at Imiloa's campus. And
wow.
the distance between the airport and Imiloa is about 25 or 30 minutes. That day, I think we told them to drive really slow. because the storm had just lifted, your planes had landed, you were on your way to Imiloa, all of you in that group. Jamie's been to Imiloa 3 times. Like, she's one of our most, treasured clients. She always brings the most incredible people. And the team just, there's something very special about the Costa Rican people in general, but the Imiloa, they just went to work to make that campus accessible. And Jamie said that when you all got up there, they were serving mocktails and smiling as if nothing had really happened. Yeah, there were a few trees down or whatever, but meanwhile, they were chainsawing and clearing the campus and making it so that you could access it. And then the no electricity thing was, I think, very confronting the first day for a lot of people, by the way, including us, because this had never happened before.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, we're like a luxury retreat center. But when you set an intention as powerful as what Imiloa is, and you serve people like you and your daughter and the people who come with as powerful of intentions as they set coming into a container like that, I've really learned to just trust, Ange, that when something happens like that, it's really just best for me to let it go. I can stress myself out on what my image looks like and what the reviews and everything. But then once I just eased into it after day one, I was just like, yeah, there's absolutely nothing. The whole mountain, the whole town was without it. It's not like it was unique to our property. And I just let go. And, it was a little crazy, but it was really beautiful to see people connect. And then it was really abrasive, like you said, when the power came back on, and it was like things just changed.
Yeah.
And I've reflected on that a lot in terms of, do we want to create more of an internet-free area on the campus, or have a specific place for internet? And what is this thing that is causing us to focus so much? Like, it's just an attention grabber.
Yeah.
And we all know it, and yet we all still do it. It's interesting. It's really interesting. How was the experience for you, though? Was it tough the first day and then it eased up, or were you just good from the first moment?
Well, like I said, for me, if it was just me, I wouldn't have cared. But I was there with my daughter, and she's not as durable as me. And so, my concern is ensuring that she's okay so that I can have a good time. So that's always just can be a little stressful as a parent, but I thought it was great. I wouldn't have missed a beat. The food was right on point. I enjoyed like having to take the flashlight and like find our way down to the cabin. I love the adventure, I thought that part was really cool. So I enjoyed everything about it. The heat was a challenge because I was worried it was going to be super hot, but then I needed to not be worried because by the time we got down there, it cooled down. It was totally fine. So anything that I was worried about, I realized I didn't need to be worried about. And it was a beautiful lesson in just letting go of control and just letting it happen and enjoying every moment of it like it was by design. So I loved it.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that was your experience.
Yeah, even the next day, I think we had massages and we were still struggling with the power, and my daughter didn't want to get a massage with me. Shocking. She didn't want to do a couples massage with her mother. I was like, okay, well, how do I make this work? And I was like, dude, I'll go to the heart of Imiloa. That was the structure, right? Where
Where we all meet.
Yeah, but where's the one down below where we
House
do
of Masters?
House of Masters. Yeah. So I was like, why don't I just do my massage down here in House of Masters? It has no walls and you're in the middle of the jungle, and it was raining and there was no power and it was beautiful. Like, what a beautiful place to get a massage, where I felt like I was literally just, in the jungle, full immersion. Every part about it was so great. Yeah.
When would you say, I know this is your podcast and you're supposed to be asking the questions, but I'm curious, like, when in your life did you start practicing this level of acceptance and really learning to accept life on life's terms?
Oh, I have gone back and forth on this in my life so many times, but I've gotten to a point where I have so much, partly because of my age, so much hindsight that I've taught myself, as opposed to like not enjoying it, what am I getting out of this, or what should I be getting out of this? Like, hindsight's great, but how do I have hindsight in the moment so that I'm really appreciating the lesson while it's happening, as opposed to 2 weeks later and put myself through hell? And why did that happen? It's like, well, why is that happening? So it's definitely been a training that I've been doing for a couple of years now to get the lesson while it's happening.
Get the lesson while it's happening. It allows you to practice the acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. And with every door that closes, that's okay. There's a better door over there, or there's a better purpose or a more divine reason. And so I almost find it exciting. It's like, well, that didn't work out. Why not? Ooh, there's something better coming along. Great.
Totally. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So let's talk about Imiloa. Like you had quite the many, many, many years of creation before its inception. And
Yeah,
you had
that's
to go through a lot to get it to where it is.
where do you yeah, I love your questions because I could literally just jump on the train anywhere. Is there something specifically
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I know
Wherever your heart dictates, what sounds good for you?
Inception, go. That's great. That's great. I love that. I love that freedom. Um, yeah, I would say it's funny. I was just speaking earlier today with an old friend of mine. Literally 15 years ago, she used to produce for me. I used to be in the television business. I was the youngest host in late night TV history on ABC after Jimmy Kimmel, back when TV still mattered and was a thing. And Felicia, who I was just talking to, produced for me during those days. She did talent booking, publicity. She produced. She's one of the best producers. She's like an Emmy-winning producer. She's produced all the brilliant shows recently, even like the online shows like Red Table Talk and all that. And we were just catching up, and she was like, "So how did this Imiloa thing go?" Because people who knew me when I was in my 20s knew me as an aggressive, slightly megalomaniacal, will stop at nothing to be successful, closeted gay. Like that's really what that is.
That's a lot of great adjectives right there.
That was my
Megalomaniacal. Like, oh, I love that one. I've never heard of that one.
megalomaniacal, closeted gay. That's basically what it was.
Perfect.
And interestingly, the moment I came out of the closet is the minute all my bipolar symptoms disappeared. Imagine that.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, true story.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, my life was filled with trying to make it and be successful and be known for my success and just revving the ego. And eventually I had to go through hitting my own rock bottom and my own dark night of the soul so that I could have a reset. Otherwise, I would have probably ended up 6 feet under, not because I was particularly crazy in terms of substances or whatever, but I was revving so much, so fast. And when I look back, I think it was really Ange, just part of me grieving the loss of my brother. My brother died when I was 17. He was 13. He died in my parents' arms after 2 years with leukemia. And I think that my revving and my constantly trying to fill, one of my agents once said, "You're trying to fill the goddamn God-sized hole that was blown through you in childhood, and you never will be able to fill it, but you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to fill it until you just stop." And thank God, when I enrolled myself in a 12-step program, I kind of got a glimpse of what it is I was doing. So yeah, it was like my 20s and early 30s was based on just hustling and then resetting and stopping. I had lost everything when I was 27. My house got washed away in a hurricane, Hurricane Sandy, in 2012 in New York City. I lived on a tiny island between JFK and the Rockaways. And I went into my grandma's basement for what was supposed to be a month, and I was there for 2 years. And I guess you could call it the beginnings of a spiritual experience. I think the beginning of a spiritual experience starts with surrender. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was learning to surrender. Like I would try a bunch of things to get out of that basement and nothing would work. And it's like when you do that, you then have a choice. Do you continue doing what you've been trying, or do you just pause? Surrendering is not giving up, but I had to stop. I had to listen to something other than this incessant chatterbox that's in between my two ears.
Yeah.
And, eventually I did. I enrolled myself in a 12-step program and I started to learn to live life on life's terms. I started to take action for the thrill of taking action and not live for results. So much of my life, Ange, was because so much of my torment in my life was because I was just driving to results that meant nothing. Youngest host in late night TV, who cares? That's cute for a minute.
Yeah.
But who actually cares about how much money I have in the bank or how much people know who I am? It all started to become empty and meaningless during those years in the basement. And it was really the great reset. And then coming out of that, I started to get clear. And with that clarity, a series of miraculous events happened where I moved to Maui. and my house was paid for by the Airbnb that I had in the backyard. And so I could just invite people to my home. And so I did. I just invited friends and friends of friends and friends of friends of friends to just come and enjoy Maui. Um, and that really opened me up to the idea that human beings want to feel at home in their transformation.
Mm.
And that's why I created Imiloa, the place that you experienced a couple of weeks ago with your kid.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So it almost seems like, have you read the book Celestine Prophecy?
A long time ago.
Yeah. So
That's a great book to revisit, actually.
it
That
is.
for me, I was like, I gotta revisit that. Okay, tell me what
It
you were gonna
is. Well, it's kind of like what you said. It's just following your heart, and things just keep getting laid out in front of you as long as you're just doing what feels right. Any little inkling, even though it seems super weird, like, I don't know, I just got this feeling, so I'm just going to go this direction. And it's fully trusting the universe that what feels right for you is right. And I feel like that's what your little journey was, because like you said, it doesn't even make sense how it just universe kept providing for you, how everything was paid for, how this tragedy ended up in this really cool thing that as a result, and all this stuff wouldn't have happened if that didn't happen and that didn't happen. And it just seems like the ultimate, like, kind of cool hero's journey of trusting the universe.
I struggle with this often because you are absolutely right. And I don't struggle with it for myself, but I see people's attachments in real everyday life and that cause them to do things that ultimately can disrupt or destroy their lives. And what I want to say to them, but you can't give it to someone until they're ready for it to be given to them. But what I want to say is just trust that life is happening for you. That, how do I know I'm in the right place? Because I'm here. There's no real negotiation or debate with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I struggle with communicating that to others, but this is not something I think that can be communicated. I think it has to be internalized, felt, realized by the individual. But boy, what I've recognized, Ange, is to just show up for when the conversation needs to be had about it. Because when people are on that trajectory of discovery and awakening, there's nothing better than having a friend like you or a friend like me be able to really hold that space, because that's a powerful moment when people start to realize, like, oh, this is how magical life can be, or
Yeah.
whatever. I hope I'm not going too woo woo, but I really believe in this stuff that we're talking about.
Oh, I agree too. And I feel the same way. Like when you're on a same level, a magical level. And so, like, interestingly for me, like, I'm in this, like, in the last few years, hardcore entrepreneurial, hard mindset, discipline, freedom. Like, and I love that. But I've also in the last 6 months gotten 8 months super woo woo, like you said, because there's also so much power in connecting on such a spiritual level and just trusting the universe. Like, I don't have to control everything. And even though this sucks, okay, it might still suck for another 6 months, and it is what it is. Where's your and just, it is what it is. Radical acceptance. And then when you're not fighting it or trying to control it, you can actually just enjoy it for what it is.
Now, here's my question to you, Angie. You talk about this the last few years, that how you're, what did you call it? Radical entrepreneurship? Is that what you call it?
Yeah. Extreme entrepreneurship or something. Yeah.
Do people, because I heard a little bit of your story at Imiloa, do your listeners, do your people like know how legit and insane of an entrepreneur you are? Like, do people actually know, or do they kind of just see it, but they don't really interact with, like, do people in your circle and who listen to the show know the level of precision with which you are, the level of precision is not the word. Yeah, the intensity with which you are truly an entrepreneur. Do people know that?
I don't know if they do, because I don't really lead with that. So I don't know how much people do or don't.
I'll let them discover it for themselves. But for people who are watching or listening, people have always put me in that kind of box of being like very intense, very relentless. And then I meet someone like Angie, and then I find out what you're up against and what you're creating despite what you're up against every week. It is incredible to me. It is incredible. So yeah, the last several years of radical or extreme entrepreneurship, I would say that's an understatement.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. It takes one to know one. That's why I instantly felt a kindred spirit with you when I heard your story. I'm like, oh my God, our stories are so similar. This is so awesome. You just start to
Totally.
recognize each other and where we're at in our journeys. And to be in the same place in a journey is really cool as well, because sometimes we're at the end of the lesson, sometimes we're at the beginning, sometimes we don't know what the fuck's happening. But for us, I feel like we're like in a similar place. So it makes it very relatable for sure.
Totally.
Yeah. Speaking of, you have a brand new baby you're birthing from Imiloa. You're having a second baby. Is that true?
It's something that we've been, I literally was like, did I put something out that shouldn't be out? Thinking about like, because I don't think I'm having a child. Um, yeah, look, Imiloa's original vision when I first created it in 2018 was to be an intercontinental institute for the education and advancement of human beings.
Mm,
And, we had to pause on that for a variety of things for the first several years, building another location. There was some real wisdom to going deeper, not bigger. I think being a compulsive entrepreneur, like I think you and I both share a characteristic of, sometimes just for the sake of creating or taking action or for the sheer joy of it, or even the game of it,
mhm.
the focus can sometimes get um directed into go bigger,
Yep.
because we can. And I spent a month in India earlier this year doing a panchakarma, 21-day panchakarma, no sunlight, very little movement of the body, real rigorous treatments, really incredible, a 5,000-year-old medicinal practice. And it was extraordinary. I would invite anyone who
Wow.
resonates with anything of what I just said to Google it, panchakarma in India. Anyways, I did that and I recognized one thing I really got as I went through this intense cleanse, mental, mind, emotional, spiritual, physical. I really recognized that just because I can create and just because I can manifest doesn't mean I always have to.
Mm,
I can enjoy the sacred pace. I can enjoy a pregnant pause.
yeah.
And so, yeah, so I've really just accepted that understanding that I got while I was in India, that deep, deep knowing in those 120-degree days with no air condition, doing this regimen of herbs and very limited, not limited food, but like limited types of food, and then intense treatments. It was a total cleanse of every part of my
Crazy.
being.
And no sunlight. Like that's the one that I'm just stuck on is wait, no sunlight for
So
21 days?
5 acres, five
Yeah.
acres of land, and they had covered walkways.
Yeah.
So I could see the sun. I would see the
Okay.
sun
Okay.
down. I wasn't in a dark room. But yeah, they don't want you in direct sunlight because it causes your body to work harder to deal with that. Um,
Interesting.
it's basically a 21-day rest, like you've never rested. And to give you an idea, I'm going off in a different subject, but I guess that's what you want here. That's the conversation that we're having.
Yep.
Um, what most startled me, I think, because I'm only 37 and I didn't think I had taxed myself that much.
Mm,
I went to India and I would do nothing all day. I mean, nothing. I would rest almost all day. I wouldn't sleep. They wouldn't allow you to sleep, but I would rest because that's what you're going there for. And I would still sleep 10 hours a night.
wow.
My body was so physically, emotionally exhausted from the years of revving my nervous system that no
Yeah.
matter how much I rested during the day without sleeping, just resting, I still slept 10, 12 hours. And I have the aura ring. So it wasn't just a fabrication, like, oh, I slept 10 hours. It was like I looked at my average nightly sleep in India. It was 10 hours. So, anyways,
Amazing. You're probably in the green like all the time. Oh, that's amazing.
yeah, exactly. I was.
Mm,
Yeah,
hmm.
so I started to just slow things down a lot in my life. And to your point, we are opening a second location. We're in the process of exploring opening a second location. We thought we were going to do it in
Yeah.
January. We slowed it down a bit. So it'll likely be sometime next year. It'll probably be in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
We already have the location in mind, but even in January, I felt myself revving and hustling again, like my pre-grandma's basement days, like back when I was in New York. And I was like, I don't have to do this. I
Yeah.
don't have to prove anything to anybody, including myself. I am enough. And I feel like that we get in these weird, jacked spaces with our nervous system because we forget that joy is our birthright and we actually are enough. Like I can just chill the F out. And so even though we had collected deposits and were launching this location, refundable deposits, of course, which we refunded to everybody. Even though we had collected these, I just said, you know what, we're going to pause on this until the end of the year. And everybody was obviously really fine. We gave everybody back their money. It's part of being an entrepreneur, is practicing radical acceptance as well. And yeah, so
Oh, I
look
love
at that.
because then
I
when
bet
you
you didn't know that question. That
uh,
question would give you such an answer.
no, it's a perfect answer because I think you're right. We get as entrepreneurs bigger, bigger, more and more, bigger, bigger. I can handle it. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And to the point where it becomes detrimental, and your ROI, how much you're expending compared to how much you're giving. Now you have, like, that's what happened with us as Elevate, right? We grew so big and we were under pressure to open more centers, more centers, more centers. So we grew to a certain point, but now to maintain that point without like shrinking, it's a lot of work. And so like when people are like, what about expansion? I'm like, dude, I'd be happy just to be full, like just to fill what I got. Like, it doesn't always have to be more is better, but we definitely convince ourselves of that for sure.
Especially in the US. I mean, you're in the US. I grew up and spent a lot of time and still conduct a lot of business with the US, and more is more is more. And like I learned from Douglas Rushkoff, who's an amazing thinker on tech and the evolution of media. He wrote a book called Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus back in the day. And it was about, well, whatever it was about. It was really about overgrowth. And I remember in this book, he said, in any other organism besides tech or US business, growth, more and more and more growth, like overgrowth in any other organism is called cancer.
Mm,
And yet it's what's rewarded in our society. The overgrowth of cells, ultimately,
yeah.
other factors, is what causes cancer. And yet we don't see what we're doing in our more is more is more as cancerous. And it actually is.
Interesting. What a beautiful analogy. Like, I love that. And it's obviously not very popular in the American like world because we're like so opposite of that, but it's true. And then you like slow down and appreciate what you have instead of always trying to achieve something that you don't ever achieve.
You never achieve it.
Yeah.
You never achieve. Yeah, the Imiloa is open, and when we open Imiloa #2 or another center could be open. But what is that? All that does, and this is where people get really lost, I think, and I'm really glad to have had training so early in my life on shit like this. All that does is create a feeling. And so that's actually what you're chasing. You're chasing a feeling.
Yeah.
And so money in the bank creates a feeling of XYZ ABC. Having another location, having a famous podcast, having a this, having a that, being a this creates a feeling. So it's like, what is the feeling that you want to create? Get really clear on that first. Get clear on the type of person that you need to be in order to create that feeling. Get clear on the mental mind state that you need to have leverage on yourself to be able to create that feeling. And look at that. The creation may or may not be needed. You may not actually need to do what you think. You may not need the car that you think. You may not need the other location that you think. If you can just feel I want to feel successful or credible. Well, let's start there. And then let's decide if creating something else from that place is necessary. But nobody actually takes time to reflect. Very few people take time to reflect on that piece, but I think it is paramount. It's become so important in my life.
I love that. You know what what concerns me about that, and this is just, my own shit, is I get very concerned about slowing down so much that it's hard to get started again. Like the 21-day arrest, I'm like, oh, what if I love it so much I don't ever want to move again, and I can't do all these things I want to do? Or if I disconnect so much, what if I don't feel like coming back again? And so for me, I always associate like slowing down or not doing more as detrimental to my well-being, which is, I know it's not right, but it's like this fear of like, I'm going to get fat and lazy again. If I allow that to happen, I'm going to get fat and lazy. And therefore I just got to keep going so that I don't slow down and stop.
Totally. I mean, Dr. Wayne Dyer says, if you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. If you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. It's as if, he says, when you are no longer working or whatever, creating, whatever the identity is, it's as if you literally cease to exist. It's a total death of the ego. And so there is a part of me, like when I moved to Maui and went into semi-retirement, or when I went to India for 21 days, there's a part of me that really enjoys the experimentation with the death of the ego, because I was terrified. Not similar, not exactly to you. I actually thought my business would collapse. I was like, how am I not going to be in touch with people for 30 days? Like,
Mhm.
this is insane. Guess what? It got strengthened. It didn't collapse. It actually was strengthened. And, I struggled with the first 17 days of letting go on the Punch of Karma, Ange. And then at day 17, I experienced bliss, and I experienced
Mm.
not really wanting to come back. And I didn't want to come back. I was in total bliss. I resisted it for 17 days.
Yeah.
Last 4 days was like, oh, this is what true joy is, for no reason other than just joy. This is what it was, an unspeakable moment. And I didn't want, I didn't think about extending because I was still in my right mind, but I'm sure plenty of people do that. And then they're like, whatever. The
Yeah.
thing is that I have something
Mm.
that I enjoy creating. I wanted to come back, and I still feel like that I had work to do. If I didn't have that, I may just float off after a 21-day Punch of Karma. And I may do it still sometime in the future. The idea of it right now sounds very appealing as I'm talking about it out loud.
Damn, dude, I feel like that's something I need to go do. I mean, and
Yeah,
I know I would fight it because I'm so used to so much activity, but I think I would really love it. And then for some
so
reason, that's why I'm fearful of it. It's like, I think you'd
exactly.
the same reason I never did heroin. I'm like, I feel like you would like it too much. So you should not do that.
That's why That's actually why I did not do cocaine. I didn't do any drugs really, but I drank like a skunk for a while. But yeah, I didn't get into the cocaine or anything like that because I just thought, oh, that would be something. And I find that I would never recommend, it's funny, I would never recommend a Punch of Karma to anybody, and yet it was the best thing I've ever done in my life. But it was so hard. The
Yeah.
thing that I do notice is that the type of people that go on a Punch of Karma, they're not like my wallflower kind of, oh, life is so kumbaya friends. It's actually my intense hard rocker kind of A-type personalities, high strung, that end up loving Panchakarma because it is such a gift to the soul, or to the body, maybe not the soul, but to the body, and the nervous system of a high strung individual. So can I just say, I
Well,
love
you
that you've
said hard rocker, so that's me. No,
I know how to fit you in there.
you
And
did.
can I just say, I love this format of the podcast of just free flowing. Like, it's very, um, it must be terrifying if you get someone who doesn't know how to talk. Uh, because you
True.
really,
It's yet to happen, but I'm sure it would suck because like
I
at
mean,
the end of the day, people just want to connect with somebody and have a meaningful conversation. So it's not that hard. And of course, I wouldn't put someone on here that I didn't think could just hold a conversation.
yeah, it really is that though. I love that the burden is on both of us to be able to have a really good conversation. That's good. That's really good. I love that format. Well
Well,
done.
thank you. Well, you are a master podcaster, right? So I
Yeah.
know I had to step up my game. So that's a little piece of your history too. Tell us about the depths that you went through to do your podcast. I love this story.
So I think I told you, right, when you were at Imiloa.
Yeah.
So look, I was in grandma's basement after losing everything, as you know, and as your listeners are learning. And, it's cute to tell that story now because I'm on the other side of it. It was hell when I was in it. I was in a 12-step program. I couldn't get a job. I didn't want to get a job. Not that I was embarrassed, but I'm a business person. I'm a creator. I had been an entrepreneur since 13, and now I'm 27 and no one will take my calls. Like, what is this? So it was a true reset. I started and failed at 5 businesses in grandma's basement, all sorts of different things. And the sixth one, after a year and a half of not earning any money, the sixth one worked, and it was a podcast. And I know people are like, huh, a business and a podcast. I got into it in 2013. My friends told me, listen, you can talk and you have a Rolodex like nobody else. And people, will forgive you, because I had screwed over a lot of people in my 20s. But what I would do is I would call people up that maybe weren't even on the best terms with me. And I said, hey, you want to come and talk about yourself for an hour? Like, I'll give you the best environment creating this show. It's at the intersection of culture and consciousness. That's kind of how I launched with it.
Mm.
So it was really my way to make amends with people, honestly, because it just celebrated people. I just learned that it's much more interesting celebrating others than it is celebrating myself.
Yeah.
Hello to all of the narcissists out there. Take a pointer. It's much more interesting to be interested in others than it is in yourself. But it takes some, that's the depth of my ego that was happening in the basement. And by the way, the ego is never fully dead, I don't think, but it was certainly dying that round. in any case, I started the podcast. Grandma, bless her heart, in Lewiston, Maine, did not have internet. And so I did the podcast from a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot so that I could steal their internet. And I would upload the podcast from a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, sometimes at 2 a.m, and cops would show up behind me because who am I with, I have a flashlight, 2 a.m in a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, and a 2004 Jetta Gold, grandma's car. And I'm like uploading, and I have my laptop and I have a big microphone. I mean, I really look like a real ticket.
Did you have like antennas on the car? Like I picture you like,
I mean, it certainly felt like it.
Yeah.
It certainly felt like it, but no, I'd be uploading at 2 a.m because I wanted to be able to, if I just gotten the episode from my editor, I would want to upload it for England because I had a lot of listeners in the UK. Anyways, this podcast went from like 0 to 300,000 downloads in 3 months. A month. It was 250 to 300,000 downloads a month. And an agency picked me up to sell ads against it, of course, because that just became profitable. And I went from like 0 to 12,000 a month in revenue, which was a lot I was a single dude. I mean, I had an editor, but what was that, right? And I had a producer eventually. But it was phenomenal. And I did it from a Dunkin' Donuts. I did 300 episodes from a Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. I mean, incredible, with some of the most, I didn't do like famous people, but I did well-known people in their niches. And I would book people that were not doing podcasts. Anyways, it worked out in such a beautiful way. And it's just funny how things work out, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an amazing opportunity to connect with people. That's what I love about my podcast is like, I get to just talk to people for at least, an hour, hour and a half, and just have great conversations. Like, how cool is that for someone who likes to talk like me and you?
Well, yeah, but I think, yes, it is cool. I will tell you, it was life or death for me though, doing that podcast, because I was like, I need to earn money.
Yeah.
Like, it was not like, now I feel like people do podcasts as brand extensions, if they're not earning from it or earning a ton from it. Back then I was like, this has to work. So like I would talk to famous folks or well-known folks, and then I would clip certain parts of their interviews, literally the audios, and then my producer would send it to all the different blogs and online magazines and write the headline and write the story. Like, we had Beyonce's publicist on, Yvette Noel Shore, who's a good friend of mine. Beyonce's publicist tells all. Boom. Every news magazine picked that up. Digital news magazine drove viewers or listeners back to the show. Like, I would have loved to have done a podcast casually, but it was life or death for me. I had to earn. I wanted to earn. And thank God it worked. But it's interesting what human beings are capable of when they're put up against the wall and they have to produce.
Yeah. Well, like you nailed it. You set the intention. The intention was, this has to work. This isn't just a hobby and I'm going to get tired of it. Like, this is my livelihood and this has to work. And I think by you setting that intention, it did.
It
just
did.
that simple. It had to. There was no other option.
Thank God. Yeah.
But you don't have that podcast anymore yet. At some point you decided I was good. We are moving on now.
Well, I created Imiloa and I've started it again. And I've been looking at, I'm often ahead of the curve in terms of what's popular. When I started the late night talk show on ABC, it was a reality talk show, which again sounds now like, oh, great. But back then that was a new genre. And then years later, Chelsea Handler takes off with her reality talk show. Everything's reality talk. And then the lines blurred. Kind of the same thing with Imiloa. I started Imiloa in 2018. Well, the podcast certainly in 2013. Started Imiloa in 2018. Retreats were not that big of a thing in 2018. They were a thing, but certainly not in this area in Costa Rica. So yeah, I think I paused the podcast. I've been doing it again recently. Because I still have all those subscribers. Like whenever I put out an episode, I still get, certainly not 100,000 downloads, but I still get downloads. So I've been doing it more often, kind of seeing how I want to get back in, because I do enjoy talking to people. And what I enjoy more than talking to people is allowing their mastery and expertise and story to be able to flow through. Like, I like being a vessel for people's stories, their teachings, their transformations, because we don't know who's listening right now and who can be touched, transformed, and inspired by this conversation.
That's right. Yeah. That's my goal. It's just if this could help just one person, or if we could help anybody by having this conversation, it's like my obligation for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that. Can you please either write a book or do a podcast and just call it Grandma's Basement? Like it's just like that picture for me. It's like that just says it all. It's kind of like Latchkey Kid. You hear Grandma's Basement? It's like, oh, I totally got it. Yeah.
I have thought about doing, yes. The answer is yes. And
Yes.
I'm a pretty action oriented person, so I really trust that I haven't so far because there's more to the story.
Yeah.
I just went through an incredible experience that I realized, oh, maybe this is why I haven't written the book. And I haven't talked about this publicly. I've written about it, but I haven't talked about it. My mom just died, and I had been estranged from her because of alcoholism for 16 years.
Wow.
And she died, I guess, a week and a half or 2 weeks ago now. And I, so I was trying to go to Maine, which is where I'm from, to my aunt's wedding. This was in mid-July. And I got so stuck in Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta is great to fly through unless there's a storm, but I was stuck there for 2.5 days. I
Wow.
mean, literally all the flights to Boston, to Portland, to Bangor, I could get no flights on any airline. Everything was booked. And I have status on these airlines, but let me tell you something. Status goes out the freaking window. They don't give a shit about your status when everything is upside down.
Yeah.
So it was also really humbling for me because I was like, oh, I have blah 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 medallion thing.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter. So I surrendered after 2 days of
Mm.
trying to get to Maine, 2.5 days, and I went to see my friend in North Georgia, Sherry, Dr. Sherry Rosenthal, who helps people actually produce retreats. She's lovely, and so I spent the weekend at her house because I just was like, I do not want to be in this airport anymore. And I was out for a hike in the woods. This was literally 2 weeks ago, Ange. Honest to goodness, hand to God. I was out for a walk in the woods and I was like, I missed the wedding. Should I still go up and say hi to my aunt? And I was like, nah, I booked a ticket to Costa Rica. But I was in the woods and I was like, no, you don't know how long these people are going to be around for. I was thinking about my aunt. And so I booked a ticket to Portland, Maine that day. And I went to Portland instead of Costa Rica. And I landed in Portland and I got a random text from my stepsister who haven't talked to in 10 years. And
Mm.
she said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your mom's dying in hospice. And I
Wow.
said, what? And I hadn't seen my mom in 16 years. And there was, she really started drinking heavily after my brother died. And so I had accepted, Ange, that my mom would not be in my life. Like this was
Yeah.
done. As an adult child of an alcoholic, sometimes that's just, you have to go through that level of acceptance. And all my
Yep.
spiritual work and everything had been done so that I could accept that.
Mm.
And when I got that text, I was like, oh, that's why I'm in Maine. Like
Yeah.
it became so clear. My aunt was like, what? You're going to go see her? I said, do you know how many, the chances of me being here right now when
Yeah.
I was not supposed to be here, when I was late, when the whole thing got orchestrated so that 2 hours after I land, I get a text that my mom's dying.
Yeah.
Like, I certainly have a relationship with the power greater than myself. And to me, that was like red alert, like, hello.
Yeah. Divine intervention.
So I went to see my mom in
Yeah.
hospice, and she thought she had to die alone. Her husband is also an alcoholic. She was dying of cirrhosis of the liver. And I had to be the one to tell her she was dying. I hadn't seen her in 16 years, but no one had really told her. She came in for a stomach ache. She had told nobody in the family. Nobody knew. My whole family rushed to be by her side. And I'll tell you something right now, Ange. I have never experienced the level of profound healing that I had being at my mom's bedside.
Yeah.
We had the most extraordinary conversations. She asked, she was so shocked when I told her she was dying. She said, I would take it all back. I can't believe this is happening so soon. I expected to have more time. I lived a simple life and a small life, but I didn't want it to be over. And talking about her fear and her anger. And I was able to hold space. I had listened to so much Ram Dass while I was in India in terms
Yeah.
of being with dying people. And I was able to be there and really hold my mom. Forgiveness just was throughout the room. It just permeated the room. And she lived for 72 more hours, and we had the most extraordinary conversations. And I wrote all of them down. I actually put them on Facebook so that I can
Mm.
really remember them and also share with others, because I realize there's a lot of people grieving right now, even if they don't articulate it. Um, and And she died. She died on July 29th, 3 days after I arrived. Now, if I'd gotten that text in Costa Rica, I would not have rushed to Maine. And so it was just so divine. And I was so grateful. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, that's why the book hasn't been written yet, because my journey can only take me so far. But the journey of healing, forgiveness, healing the lineage, which I feel is what I did, by being able to be there. Yeah. So that's kind of the space I'm in right now. And it's pretty it's a pretty remarkable space to be in, and I'm really grateful. But yeah, that was kind of like, okay, I haven't written the book of Grandma's Basement because the ending hadn't happened yet, and now it has.
Oh, so beautiful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting. Like we talk about the magicalness, right? And the signs in the universe. And I started the conversation with Celestine Prophecy. And it's like, it starts to lay it out for you when you know where to look. Like my first exposure to Ram Dass was seeing East Forest, like just a few months ago. I didn't even know who that was. And I saw him. I just went to a music festival this weekend called Das Energy. Das Energy? Yeah. But it's like all based on, Ram Dass and his things and all the musicians, there's just that underlying tone of what's happening, but you just start to see the breadcrumbs. Like once you open up to it, you start seeing it. And that's just so beautiful. It's so magical to see that. And then to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a knowing, like I was prepared. I think the knowing was really important because I could have gotten that text and had a lot of resistance come up.
Sure.
There was zero resistance in my being. There was a knowingness. And I think that's the function of doing a lot of spiritual work that you may not even understand why you're doing at the time.
Right. But then that happens and you 100% know why you just did all that work so that you could be fully present for someone else to help them do what they need to do.
So clear. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, thanks for letting me share that story. First time I've shared it. May have been a little rough sharing it, but yeah, that's what's on my heart at the moment.
I'm so happy that you got that experience with your mom, for it to come full circle and for you to see her in that state. And it had to be so important for her to have you there after not having you there all that time for those last few hours. You probably made that transition so nice for her, just having her son there.
I think so. And we talked about the fear and the anger and yeah, I was able to. She's like, I think I need a spiritual advisor, but not too Catholic. I said, well, he's sitting right in front of you.
That's me.
Here I am, bald head, shake it just for you. Yeah, it was this really extraordinary experience. It was touching. And after I told her she was dying, she talked a little bit about seeing my brother who died in her arms at 13. I told you earlier. And she says, I wonder what form I'm going to see him in, the spirit form, the physical form of when he died, or the physical form of his age now. I said, imagine that. You get to see Alex. And she went back to sleep, snooze for a second. Then she woke up again and she's like, gosh, this must be so hard for you to have this happen again. And I was like, this is the first time that my mother has been sober and able to be empathetic with me in 16 years. It was an extraordinary experience. Wow. Because I just hadn't had it. And so I had grieved the loss of my mom, even though she was still here in the world, accepted it. She comes back into my life. I then get validated in a way like every child wants to by their parent. And then she's gone again. So it's like the waves of, and now she's gone for good, by the way. Knock, knock, hello. But the waves of grief and like the avalanche of grief that started after that, which I didn't think was possible because I had already, one of my spiritual teachers here in Costa Rica, she said, it would have been easier if you would have never seen her again, but this is better. This heals the lineage. And I was like, okay, got it.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
I've been learning a lot about that genetic lineage and how much, a lot of times what we're carrying forward isn't even our own. And then to become ultra aware of what we're passing on to others and why it's important for us to heal ourselves, because we are receivers and deliverers of whatever spiritual plane we can get. So why not be the best versions of ourselves?
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, it's funny because after my spiritual teacher said that to me,
Mm.
One of the things I said is I'm curious about the science of this lineage business. Because again, I'm not much of the woo woo. I'm not interested in like the holier than thou or this is ethereal or whatever. But the science and the practice and the understanding and like looking at evidence-based approach to understanding the lineage and the impact and so much of what we're carrying is not ours, that stuff's interesting to me.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's
What
why
kind how
that's
did
why I'm doing that work with my daughter. I'm like, look, before you have kids, get yourself right. Get yourself 100% right. Not saying she's wrong.
yeah,
But she's had traumas and stuff. And I'm like, let's work on healing you before you have kids and pass down your trauma. And that really like spoke to her because she could relate to that.
have you been is there any particular authors or thought leaders in the area that have impacted you in terms of the lineage thing?
Not necessarily the lineage. Not
Okay.
yet. Certainly, if you know of any, let me know. I know I'm going to go to a retreat in September where they're going to do constellation
Oh, family
something.
constellation.
And and I think that has a lot to do with the lineage. So I'm very intrigued as to what that could bring up for
You know
me.
where the retreat is or what the retreat is?
Oh, it's a girl I know, Jen Carrasco. She's having it. It's just like in Auburn. She's just doing an Airbnb.
Got it. Oh, okay. Got it. Got it. Got it. Great. Great. Family constellation work.
It's not going to be no Imiloa though. I can tell you that much right now.
You can only take one of those a year. Shit.
No way, man. I could live there. I loved it there. I loved everything about that whole trip.
Oh, that's so good.
You've
That's so
created such a beautiful paradise for people to heal and feel and experience in like the best environment ever.
thanks, Ange. Yeah, it feels like that. It feels like that has been accomplished and
Yeah.
continues. Now it continues to just be the gift that keeps on giving. I'm going in with the group tomorrow, and because I go in, twice or three times a month, and I'm going in with the group tomorrow, and it's just the thrilling part to me is watching the group who haven't experienced it, which everybody besides two people haven't experienced it. It's just it can be confrontational for people the first time
Mhm.
driving up that mountain, getting there, but it's my favorite thing to watch because then 2 days later, people are like, "Oh my God, I'm happy, joyous, and free," you know?
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of that, and you'll remember when I attacked you to get your attention, when the one thing that I noticed the most about and I appreciated the most about is the core values. Like I could see it with your staff. It emanates in their beingness, in and how they handle and treat other people. Like you can tell when a team is all on the same page, and your team, it breathes all your core values, and that is very much felt and appreciated because your team is very functional and they're so great and they would literally do anything and you feel that. And that's why I was like, I don't know what your core values are, but I know they're great because your whole team is like just like you.
Well, interesting. Our top number one, I love that you're talking about core values. You are my people, is we tell the truth.
Yeah.
And that is such an important core value because it's not we don't lie and it's not we're honest,
Mm.
right? There's a difference between we tell the truth and we don't lie. We tell the truth and we're honest. It's like we tell the truth. So I think because I've really reflected on this a lot, I think part of it is just the nature of Costa Ricans and how they were brought up and they're just incredible servant-based leadership and hearts that they naturally embody.
Mm.
But I think what's different at Imiloa and why people like you who are in the field of transformation use words like this team is so functional. That I really believe a part of it is because we don't leave anything swept under the rug and we deal with the issues head on, the interpersonal issues that come up in any work environment. We have created a system for dealing with that so that no one has a loss of self-expression in
Mm.
their conflicts, where they actually feel fully self-expressed. It's in a safe environment. It takes a lot from the leadership to execute that type of environment, but it's totally worth it. And it's because we're doing the work interpersonally like a group of people or a family would. And people can feel that when they come in, that there's not stuff in between people. Because if there is, it gets dealt with nearly immediately and usually by the people that are experiencing it, not necessarily management coming in saying, you must deal with this, you're not getting
Yeah.
along. It's like dealt with at an individual and collective level, at whatever level it's happening at. And it took years to get this. But now that it's happening, it is a true difference felt, I feel.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
it's perpetual because then any new people, they're indoctrinated into that system. It just becomes a part of your culture. And it's how you maintain the culture is you just maintain those original people and it will forever be that
Or
way.
they leave, by the way, or people have come in so fast. Like we have almost in the last 3 months, we've had one person turn, like one turnover, which is great. But the
Mm.
people will leave, people will come in and be like, this is not for me. And they may not even know why it's not for them, but it's because there's this functionality that they're just not either ready for or wanting to be a part of. And that's perfectly okay with us. But it's like people are choosing now. Like, I can't tell you how long it's been since I've had to fire somebody
Yeah.
because the team just decides, hey, this doesn't work, or the person decides, hey, this doesn't work. It's not about the managers necessarily having to fire people.
100%. And with that is accountability. Like you mentioned it. It's like if you F up, you own it. Shit
Yeah.
happens. Nobody expects perfection, but if you do, you just handle it, or the group will handle it and point it out, and you move on. Like nobody needs to dwell
Nobody
in
knew.
it, but there is an
Yeah.
expectation of like excellence that you I felt with your group. I feel it with my group. But it's like it's known. And I think, like you said, people either rise to that because they like it, or they're like, it's too much for me. I don't want to be held that accountable, or I don't want to, that big of a responsibility.
Well, and what people find, Ange, if they stay around long enough, is this is actually, in most cases, not for everybody, but if it is for you, it's a team that you want to be with because it's a team. I picked my team, the senior team, not based on whether or not I liked them, not even based fully on their skill set or how they answered the interview questions. A big factor, and I think we actually talked about this at Imiloa, is who do I want to be in the trenches with?
Yep.
Because shit hits the fan so much in business. Certainly in COVID, I got my fair share of that, as we all did. And
Yep.
I was like, oh yeah, I want to be with people that I will have my back in the trenches. Because when it's good, like
Yep.
fine, all good. But it's like the trench stuff. And so I think that's now made its way down where the weakest links in an organization, it's like that's not necessarily people that you want to be in the trenches with, people who are not focused, people who are not accountable or responsible. Anyways,
People who
I
are more worried about themselves than the greater good of the group. It's like me, me, me.
precisely,
They're never going to make it in our groups.
precisely.
Yeah, I love that.
I
In the
love that.
trenches. See, there's another great name. That
There's another
totally
book.
explains. Yeah, there's the second book. It's in the
Jesus,
trenches.
Angie, I got to do these podcasts at least once every 6 months.
Deal. Let's do it. All right. Next time, put me on yours and then I'll help you get all kinds of
Exactly,
ideas.
exactly.
I love that. I wish I was coming to your next retreat. That would have been awesome.
uh Eventually you're always invited, once you're part of that Imiloa family.
Yeah.
And now I love that people randomly meet each other, and then there's these Imiloa connections because they came on two different retreats. I love that that's where we're getting after 5 years, thousands and thousands of people, 1, 2, 3, 4 degrees of separation, but you're always a part of the Imiloa family. And I do hope that you'll come back whenever you're wanting to or needing to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just in Utah. And so I went up to Park City to see Jamie and Lori.
Did
And
you?
I was, and they were the only ones. Everyone else was out of town. I was like, well, that was a bummer. And then I go to, not a bummer. It was just, everyone's busy. I was only there 2 days. So I couldn't see a lot of people from that retreat. But then I'm in the airport and all of a sudden I see Jane walk up, and she and I ended up in the exact same row on the on the airplane going to San Jose. We just universally I was like, oh, cool. I wanted to see you, but you were out of town. Well, here we are on the plane together. So
Wow.
it's so cool how, those connections work. And once the world starts opening up like that for you, you just see it everywhere. And it's amazing.
Totally. Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah. So you travel a lot then. You're out and about all the time. You don't just live permanently in Costa Rica.
Well, I do. It's funny that you're bringing that up because I just gave notice on my house that I live in. I rent a beautiful home on a 200-acre farm right outside San Jose. And Ange, after my mom died, and that's the last family member of my immediate family members. I've been really reflecting on what I want and to be around. What I want is I want to be around Imiloa, and I want to be around my friends and the extended family that I do have in different places around the world. And I realized, I've been trying to make a home for myself here in Costa Rica, like I had on Maui, right? I've been constantly struggling with being in Costa Rica, not as much struggling now, but for years and years trying to find home in Costa Rica because I had a home in Maui that I never thought I'd leave. And I mean, it was beautiful. I was Oprah's neighbor. Like, it was a whole thing up on the mountain overlooking 3 Hawaiian islands. Like, I never thought I'd leave. And then duty called, out of semi-retirement, I went because there was a vision greater than myself that had to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And so I think in Costa Rica, I've really struggled because obviously a lot has been ordained for me here. Imiloa being as successful as it is a real confirmation, but I haven't been able to really find home, and I moved all over the country. And so I've just gave my notice today for the home, and I'm going to move my stuff to a little space I have at Imiloa so that I can always have a base to drop in at. That's not, interacting with guests all the time. And I don't know if I'm going to travel like a nomadic person. Like, I'm in my late 30s. I'm not going to run around here like a digital nomad like I did in my 20s. But there is a difference, I think. It's an interesting thing, and I'm experiencing it. Like, in my 20s, people would give me very clear boundaries of how long I could stay at their house, right? When I was like, oh, I'm coming to town. Okay, you can have a week. And now that I'm in my 30s, because in my 20s, you had no money.
Right.
And like in my 30s, certainly not wealthy, but I can take care of myself.
Yeah.
So now when I tell someone I'm coming, like I call Jamie, I'm like, Jamie, I'm like, come as long as you want. I was like, what? Like, all my friends, like friends who I lived with in New York, when things were just upside down, they're in London, they're like, come as long as you want. Like, I was like, excuse me. Like, it's a whole new world because it's like, we're older now, and people know that if we need to leave, we can. Like, literally, if I had to leave back in my 20s, I couldn't afford to go anywhere. I needed to get like on a bus or a very cheap Spirit airline ticket.
Which is why people were resistant to you coming. They're like, shit, I don't know if he's going to be able to leave.
I'm not even kidding. This is exactly what it was. And now I'm like telling people I'm going a little nomadic, and maybe I'll visit. Come as long as you want. It's like a very weird, it's like a dream. It's like, oh, this would have been helpful in my 20s. So I'll keep a small space at Imiloa so that I can come back to, but I just got to figure out what's next because, if you keep, Angie, I just love the conversation because I'm able to talk about things that I haven't talked about or processed yet out loud. And I am a processor out louder.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the environment. So I've just been, I'm like, if it's not working, it's time to start something different. And I can't tell you the anxiety and the fear that I had because I have been looking to make home. And so to do the complete opposite and go nomadic is just like, okay, follow the breadcrumbs. So it's just a constant exercise in trusting. And I really do trust. And I think it's going to be an interesting new chapter. And who knows how long it'll last for. But I'm doing that starting in a month. That
sounds exciting.
Could be.
Could be. Yeah, it could be all over the place. You could end up somewhere super random.
But I know for myself, I'm going to have to like I need boundaries and I need to compartmentalize stuff because I'm running a bit. I mean, this, when you're running a business, I can't be running all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's like, I need to know where I'm going to be for like months at a time.
Yeah.
And just, that's awesome. I'm not just going to be running from country to country. I mean, that's not exactly my flavor at the moment,
Yeah. How are you handling the fires in Maui? I mean, have you lost people over there? Like, it's devastating.
Yeah, so I'm a member of the Baha'i community. I'm a Baha'i, which is a global religion, and several Baha'is did die in Lahaina. So that's been very sad. Extended friends who were, how would we say, not immediate friends of mine, but certainly within my community. And then other friends, have lost their homes. It's a very close-knit island. And then the fires just went up country, and then I saw video of literally my neighborhood. So that was a very special place for me. I was not like most people who move to Maui, which is just like, let's move to Maui. Like, I ingrained deeply as I was invited, which it took time, into the Hawaiian culture with Hawaiians and with locals. And it's not a quick to accept culture in that way.
No, so they're very inclusive. Yeah. Exclusive and protective. Yeah.
Yeah. So it took a while, but I just wanted to make sure that
it's like I had that backwards. I knew it as soon as I said it, but I think I've been processing my mother. And so I see the footage, and anybody who's been to Lahaina knows, but like the terror of like being on that, because I think about how many times I've been on that front street just hanging out, and the wind picked up,
like, and how relieving it would be for friends of mine or not family, but friends of mine who would be there, be like, oh God, the weather would change because the wind would pick up. But the wind picked up that day and the freaking thing just went.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm having a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion, and and I'm also staying away,
Yeah.
this idea that people are still going to Maui. I understand, but I also, this is not the time. Anyways, I don't usually make political statements, but to me, it doesn't make any sense to go to Maui right now. And by the way, I was supposed to be in that town on August 8th when the fires ripped through. My friend, by the way, had invited me to watch her house while she was in Canada. It was in Lahaina town, and I wasn't there only because my mother died. I
Wow.
mean, the last 2 weeks have been because I had a ticket to go, and I would have been in that town or right adjacent, Kaanapali. I actually was not in the fire zone. But yeah, I mean, insane how that would have been very traumatic. Because have you been to Maui?
Yes. Yes. I'm
I
familiar
mean,
with Kanapai and Lahaina, and yeah.
we're talking one road in and out. I mean,
Yeah.
Malibu even has more access points than Lahaina does, because you can go up to whatever that mountain there, right? I can't think of what it's called. I know, I understand the Malibu fires were impactful, but it's so terrifying that the anyways, yeah, that's just part of me processing just the limitation of where you can actually go around there, knowing that if you go north, that road is just beautiful on a calm day, but horrifying. And then you go, the whole thing is just so unfortunate.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm glad I wasn't there.
So I have an employee who is over in Hawaii right now. He's on the Big Island, and his family is letting him stay there for a couple of weeks. And so he's, doing the meeting FaceTime. I'm like, damn you. But he said the buzz with the locals on the island is it's being conceived by the locals as somewhat nefarious because of what has been burned down and in which location and how it hasn't touched the outer edges. And the natives' feelings are like it was almost intentional because people want to come in and take over that town and rebuild it and just put resorts there. And so their feeling is like, which is even sadder and scarier than this was an accident.
I mean, look, you went there, but I wasn't going to go there.
Sorry. I
No,
like to go there.
Your show, your people, you know what your people want to hear. So I did a lot. I almost put Imiloa in Maui. Imiloa was named by a Hawaiian indigenous elder when she found out what my vision was. Like, this is how Imiloa is a Hawaiian word.
Yeah.
And so I originally wanted to do it in Hawaii. And one thing I learned a lot in terms of why I couldn't do it in Hawaii is because of how strict the zoning is.
Mm-hmm.
The zoning is extremely strict and really advocates for single family homes with ohanas or hotels, not Airbnb. Not retreat centers.
And,
so that's
and
why.
also not rehabs. I tried to put a rehab over there for 5 years and never could. Same thing.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I didn't know one person who had a rehab center, but it was in like a corporate building.
Exactly.
And I think it was an outpatient. So I can imagine you had, so there you go. Case in point. Right?
Yeah, never happened. Yeah.
And I dealt with the permits. I met with the governor. Like, I went insane trying to, and at one point, indigenous Hawaiians in Oahu were going to have Imiloa on their land. It's the nation of Hawaii. It's sovereign land. Bumpy kana ahole. Anyways, he's a famous Hawaiian indigenous, but I really went deep into that whole permitting thing. And surprise, surprise, the only way zoning is, where I'm going with this, the only way zoning can change legally, according to the state of Hawaii, is if the home is destroyed or if the place is destroyed. And so this zoning Lahaina as a historical district was based on the historical buildings that were there. Those historical buildings are no longer there. And so therefore, I'm not even, nefarious is interesting, right? To be determined. But I'm just like, isn't that ironic that the historical district of the land that was most sought after, that they've been the holdout on, which was zoned as you can't go more than 2 floors up.
Yep.
Now the zoning is irrelevant because it's been totally destroyed. So that just makes someone go, huh, isn't that intriguing?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. And I think this stuff is the norm more than most people would care to know or admit, but it is a deeper underside of what really goes on.
Yeah, and it's tough because I can get really swept in those conspiracy conversations, but at some point, like conspiracy conversations are not necessarily conspiracy, it's just the exploration of truth.
Right.
And so even the labeling of conspiracy further divides, but the fact that you're hearing this from locals, and by the way, I am too, but I just, I really learned during the COVID thing, whatever side you're on the COVID thing, to just keep your mouth to keep my mouth shut. Like I started talking about masks and just questioning masks
Yeah.
early on. Like the really is it working with what this virus is? And the level of hate that I got was just, beyond. And so I don't need to be out there advocating for these things like one way or the other.
Yep.
I don't need to be getting curious publicly. I can do other work. I can focus on other things. But and so that's why I haven't mentioned anything really about this Hawaii thing, because the truth is I don't know. I do
Yeah.
find it odd that cars were incinerated metal, but that the tar wasn't burnt at all, and the the tar and the paint to put the lines in the road were not touched at all, even though the fire jumped to the other side of the street. And it's just some very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, what temperature does tar burn at versus what temperature does metal burn at? Because these cars were complete, the tires on the cars, something's not adding up from the pictures, at least. I mean, who knows what we're seeing, but something's not quite making sense.
Yeah. And that's a bummer. And you're right. Those of us with our curious minds need to keep our curiosities probably to ourselves. But it's also very relieving when you find other people who have the same curiosities.
Yeah,
You're like, oh, yeah, it's not just me.
totally. And then it's also like, what do you do with the curiosity? Like, okay,
Right.
let's say it was somewhat intentional or fanned or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, now what? It's like, it's such a spiritual exercise to live in the world right now, because
Yeah.
it requires a level of deft, DEFT. I love this word, deft discernment, to just stay focused. Cause it's like, okay, yeah, you know, different things happen. You see different things happen right in front of your face. The 9/11 towers just collapsing in on themselves seems odd, but am I going to really focus my energy on these types of things? Or am I going to focus on my spiritual evolution, my contribution to human beings, being able to be loving?
Yep.
I don't know. It's the balance between like denial and also just preservation of self, I think.
Yeah, and you have a bigger purpose. Like it's not our purpose to debunk all these things as we're being told as truth. Like that's not our purpose. We have a bigger purpose. Therefore, we got to somewhat stay in our lanes as far as, so we're the most efficacious, effective in what we do. How's that
Yeah,
word?
I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Like I watched the movie The Matrix and I'm like, oh my God, this movie was so ahead of its time. And it's like, okay, cool. Like Angie, you can see beyond the Matrix, but does it help you to like worry about what's happening over there? Or it's like, okay, yes, I can see it, acknowledge it, but this is my purpose over here. I need to worry about this, what I can make a difference in.
Exactly. I think that's the key.
Awesome. Love your glasses.
Thank you. I wanted to look at before, because I know we're probably coming to the end, but I wanted to look at everything on your wall behind you. And I love that you've listed your core values behind you and everything. That's beautiful.
Yep. Got our Corvette. Wow. Good for you for being able to read that. It needs to be
But that's why I
darker.
had to put my glasses on.
Yes, you have everything I love. I got my 49ers, my Arate, my core values, my concerts, my, fitness, you name it. It's all me. It's all
And it's
here.
all purple. I love how purple you are. You were just on brand. Oh man.
Absolutely. So tell us where our viewers can find you if they want to know more about you. They want to look up Imiloa. Like, what's the best way to do all that?
So Imiloa's Instagram at
Mm.
imiloa.institute or imiloainstitute.com. And if you use code word Jake for any retreat that you check out on our site, you get $300 off. I just remembered that we did this thing when I did a whole bunch of podcasts back in the day,
Oh,
and
nice.
that code is still accessible. So you use code word Jake if you end up booking a retreat, and Angie will get credit for that, which is nice.
Yes.
And then you can, we are interviewing a lot of the different hosts at Imiloa. And like I said, I'm starting up the podcast. So you can see, I think, 525 historical episodes of the Jake Sasseville Show anywhere you enjoy podcasts. So that's just the Jake
Wow.
Sasseville Show. And that's all there. Really cool interviews over the last 10 years with some of the yeah, some famous and not so famous folks. Some famous and not so famous folks. So thanks for asking.
525, that's a lot. I mean, I think I'm up to maybe 170, but yeah, five, that's a lot.
It's been a labor. It's been a labor. But now I'm doing 2 a week and it feels like really nice, evenly paced, and you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you for coming on our show. Well, one last thing. What was the thing you said in Hawaii that you became a member of?
It wasn't when I was in Hawaii. When I was a kid, I investigated the Baha'i faith, Baha', and the Baha'i faith basically is a world religion. It's the second fastest growing world religion, and basically the 3 core tenets are: we believe in the oneness of God, that we're all talking to the same God; the oneness of religion, that all religions actually one; and the oneness of humanity. And so that's what Baha'is believe. And so I had a lot of friends on Maui. I had a huge Baha'i community in Hawaii and in Lahaina in particular. I spent a lot of time in Lahaina.
Nice. I don't know how I've never even heard of that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's new for people, and that's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. It's a beautiful exploration. I found out about the Baha'i faith when I was 13, and I investigated it for 10 years before declaring as a Baha'i. I was
Awesome.
not an easy sell, and luckily no one tried to sell me. Thank God, because they don't believe in whatever that is, conversion or whatever. You have to declare yourself a Baha'i. So it's really based on independent investigation of truth, which I liked.
And it's not organized like other religions that became very
I would say
controlling with organization.
it's the most disorganized, organized religion I've ever seen. No, it is organized at an international, national, and local level. But without any clergy. There is no clergy. So your relationship is directly between you and your higher power, which I also loved. But there's some beautiful work being done by Baha'is in communities and capacity building at all levels. And so there is required to be organization from that point of view. But yeah, and of course, every religion has its blind spots and its shortfalls, and the Baha'i faith is the communities of religions have their blind spots and shortfalls, and the Baha'i faith is no exception, I think. So, yeah.
Awesome.
I'm at the age now where it's just like I love sharing with people because it's something that's personal to me, but gosh, I don't get a high off of like saying that people should be one way or the other, because I've just seen it work so many ways for so many people. Like, who the hell am I to say?
Exactly. Well, and some people take it to extremes, and so, yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, everyone's on their own path.
I should do a bumper sticker, hashtag not a zealot, or hashtag no zealot here.
Yes. Yes. Those damn zealots ruin everything. They'll
You
take
are
a
my
good thing
people.
and just go over the top.
You are my people.
Oh, awesome. Well,
What a
thank you so
joy.
much for coming on my show. I appreciate you. And I am hoping I get to see you soon at Imiloa. Love to do my leadership thing out there at the first of next year. So yeah, hopefully I see you
When
soon.
you're ready, we're ready.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Angie.
Bye.